How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everybody. It's Chasing Giants with Don Higgins, episode 24 on June 29th. How you doing tonight, Don?
Good. How are you, Terry?
I'm doing well. What's been going on, buddy? It's almost July. It's crazy that it went by that fast, huh?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I look forward to July 1st every year to get those trail cameras out. And I've already put a couple out just because we've had so much rain, and there's certain, you know, higher intrusion locations that I try to go in right before rain and get those in. And I'll put a 16 gig card in them and, you know, not check them for a couple months. But I still got a lot to put out, don't get me wrong, but been glassing for bucks every evening as well. And seeing quite a few. I haven't laid eyes on the ones that I want to, but you know, it's still early, and I've ventured into some new areas. Always trying to find another giant to chase. So I don't know. The next 60 days or so is going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. With my condition, I went ahead and got most of my cameras out here in Kentucky with the biggest cards I had. I think I either put 32 or 64 gig cards in them, just because I know I wouldn't be back for a while. Food plots look really good, but I'm probably going to be shipping you a box of trail cameras and asking you to put them up for me up in Illinois, because obviously I'm not going to be able to get up there, but we've talked about that. So I pretty much got most of mine done down here, but like I said, it'll be weeks before I get back in and actually be able to see. So hopefully here a little bit after surgery, I'll be able to glass a little bit too.
Yeah, I hope so. How's your knee coming along?
I'm still going through therapy. They did schedule my surgery. So as most people know and understand, Kentucky archery season, we open up the first Saturday in September. So that's usually right around the holiday. Most everybody here in Kentucky that bow hunts loves that, because we get that 3-day weekend and can hunt the evenings, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, being a holiday weekend. So had a meeting with the surgeon, and he said that best case scenario I'll be on crutches for 6 weeks, worst case 8 weeks, and they scheduled surgery on July 17th, a Friday. So 6 weeks I'll be walking for opening day of Kentucky archery season. That's my goal.
Well, I hope you're running instead of walking.
I definitely won't be running, but we'll be lucky if I'm walking. So, but yeah, have surgery in a couple weeks. All the other damage that was done at the accident, it's going to be kind of healed up, and they'll be able to do surgery, and we'll start getting rehab going. The doctor, of course, you know, the doctor's up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and when I tell him that I need to be able to walk by the 1st of September, he doesn't think that's very strange until I tell him why I have to walk the first Saturday in October, and he looks at me really weird when I tell him that. But everybody's got their thing, right?
Illinois season don't open until October 1st, so
I'll definitely
need somebody to come in.
I'll definitely be ready for that. So hopefully, you might be coming down to Kentucky to film for me and carry a bow in.
Well, I'll do whatever it takes.
Or drag a deer out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I haven't even told you I'm doing this, but for the listeners out there that you had this idea for an invention in episode 23, and we laughed about this, and I want you to tell us again what this invention was. because I've thought about it a little bit more, and I want to revisit it before we get elbow deep into this podcast. So I need you to explain this idea that you have.
You're talking about the one with the pulleys and the.
Yep, that's the one I'm talking about.
Well, Terry, you're laid up, and I just thought that, we got to get you in a tree somehow, and we make fun of the tree saddle. We call it the love swing. I just thought that, I could climb up into some trees and hang a pulley up there and put a rope through it, and then bring one end of that rope down and fasten it to like a boat crank on the front of a boat trailer, lag bolt one of them to the tree, and I could just crank you up in your love swing, and there you could be, and you could deer hunt up there.
Well,
so you wouldn't even have to climb a tree.
I doubted this option, but the more I got to thinking about it, I thought it might actually work. So you've never done this before. You got your earbuds in right now. I want you to push the home button on your phone. You don't know anything about this, and I want you to go to my Instagram page right now.
Push the home button.
Yeah, the little button down at the bottom where you close out, back to your home screen, and the phone will stay connected. That's why you're wearing your earbuds, so you can look at this thing. And then open up your Instagram. And for the listeners out there that want to see it, it's Terry_Peer, Peer. And I tested this theory tonight before we got on the podcast.
Well, he's setting me up, folks. I don't know what I'm in for here, but oh my, here it comes. Gee, man.
You said you wanted a picture of this.
Well,
so folks, if you're listening to this, go to my Instagram page, and I'm sure that now Don's going to screenshot this and put it all over his pages, because this is my attempt at saddle hunting, and that's probably how ridiculous I would look if I actually tried it. So if you want to head out to my Instagram page, Don didn't know I was going to do this tonight.
Man,
so.
you've even got a Lone Wolf brand love swing.
Yeah. I don't actually have a saddle hunting harness, but Lone Wolf had sent me a safety harness, and that's all I had. So Patrick pulled the side by side up, and we ran the winch over a limb in my front yard in a pin oak tree, and lifted me up about a foot. So the funny thing is, I wish somebody was videoing it, because as soon as my feet went off the ground, I just started spinning. So the picture, wow. I'm sitting there just rotating in the air.
Folks, you got to see this picture.
So I'm sure Don will share it on his social media. So
Terry has a love swing.
Oh boy.
Well,
now you know why I wanted you to wear earbuds tonight, so I could get your reaction when you saw that the first time.
I wondered what the deal was with me wearing earbuds. Why you cared about that? Wow.
All right, so let's talk about your YouTube channel. I think you posted a video this week about minerals. Tell us a little bit about that and how the new YouTube channel for Higgins Outdoors is going.
Oh, it's going good. We're releasing a new video about once a week, and I think the last video had about 2,500 views. So it's growing. The first couple only had about 1,000. So it's picking up. Trying to get it built up before hunting season. I really got some good things planned once season opens, and I'm trying to build up a following on that YouTube channel before hunting season, because I think it'll get really interesting and people really like it then. But it's going good, and if anybody's got ideas for videos they'd like to see covered, topics they'd like to see me produce a video on, just shoot them over, just go to my website, HigginsOutdoors.com, and you can connect with me through there, either email or message or whatever.
I wonder how many views me being pulled up by a winch with a safety harness. How many views would that video get?
I don't know. We can find out.
I don't know. I said in that post, when you read it, I hope that for the sake of those people that are so ate up with saddle hunting, that saddle hunting harnesses are more friendly to your man parts than safety harnesses are, because it was not a comfortable experience. I can guarantee you that. So I hope I never have to see what a safety harness feels like by using one. But no, for those of you, please go out and visit Don's YouTube page. There's a new video that he just posted. I believe it's Do Minerals Really Work? And a couple of videos from previous weeks. And make sure that you click like on those videos. It's just like the podcast. When you guys like it, it on the background does all the algorithms and actually recommends those videos for people who are into the same kind of stuff as you are. So that's why giving us a review or rating on iTunes Apple Podcast really helps us grow the channel. For instance, we set a record with episode 23 because there was so many people that went in and liked or gave us a 5-star review for the podcast last week. So it shows up as recommended for everybody else, and obviously YouTube works the same way. So go like and subscribe to Don's YouTube page, and maybe we'll put a contest in there. Once you get to so many followers, we'll hoist me up into a tree again or something like that.
Yeah.
We'll put something out there.
Caption this photo.
Yeah, there you go. I don't think Wes was too happy about the raccoon picture. Did he say anything to you about that?
Not too much, really. He just kind of rolled his eyes.
Yeah, he sent me a note and said that was not to use for social media. But my thing is, if there's not a disclaimer on the picture that he texts us, I just assume it's for social media, right?
Everything's for social media. Haven't you spent any time on social media? Good grief.
You mean people out there have an opinion?
They have an opinion, and they have no pride either. They'll show you any body part you want to see and don't want to see.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, what else? For supper?
What else is new? We've got the YouTube channel going. You've been glassing. Obviously, food plots are in. There's a lot of the Midwest that got rain here over the last 8, 9, 10 days. I know you all got quite a bit up there. I had some roll through here finally this week. I haven't been out to look at soybean patch, but I know I'm in good shape now that we got rain. I talked to Josh Pretzer earlier today, and he said they've been dry. He's worried that his spring plots are going to be a bust if they don't get rain soon.
Yeah, I seen him post something about that today, but in the last 8 or 9 days, we've had over 4.5 inches, and they're calling for another 1 to 2 inches tomorrow. My plots really look fantastic. Couldn't be much happier with them, really. And
good.
I just hope we don't have a dry fall, because if I can get some fall plots in on top of my spring plots, then the deer in my place are going to be set for the winter.
Right. Well, we've talked about it before, when it comes to food plotting, Mother Nature is what dictates everything, even the planting date, but also the results, and people are very quick to scream at us that, the seed's bad, but 99.9999% of the time it's either Mother Nature or the way it was planted that usually causes the issue. But the good news is if Josh ends up with a bust out there with his soybean plot, he'll come right back in with Deadly Dozen and still have a shot at a fall plot. So we still got time, and I think in some future episodes we're probably going to talk about some strategies of our fall food plot as that gets closer here in late July.
Right, and speaking of future topics for discussion, the next episode that we're going to film here in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about the hunting industry. And, I get a lot of questions. And when we go to shows, we all get these questions. Younger guys especially are looking to get into the hunting industry. And you and I have seen it from two different angles.
Right.
Me as an outdoor writer years ago, broke into the hunting industry that way. And, you running the pro staff for Real World Wildlife Products, you're in contact with all these folks that are, looking to be on a pro staff and looking for sponsorships and such. So with our two unique angles, next episode, we're going to hit that topic. And if anybody's got questions regarding that, it'd be a good time to submit them. We'll probably try to focus the entire episode on the hunting industry.
Yeah, so to put some bookends around it, both Don and I, Don's obviously more well known in the industry, but I'm more on the backside of the industry. So not only with Real World, but other companies as well, managing the marketing side and what companies are looking for and how you have to change. So, when it comes from anything from understanding consumer behavior and marketing budgets and different things like that, it's going to be a fun episode. John Mulligan had a photo school here in Kentucky, where he brought people in to actually teach them how to take different cameras. And I went over there for about an hour last Sunday and talked to his students about, what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a photographer to do a photo shoot and how to stand out against all the other people that, are trying to do the same thing. So I think it'll be a fun episode, and, it'll be better if we get those questions ahead of time on different things that you're looking for and understanding about the industry. We have obligations of sponsors of the show, that we have to be held accountable to. So it's going to be a fun discussion. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am too. My story is probably pretty unique. I think that's why I've been able to carve my niche in the hunting industry, if you will. I just kind of got a unique angle that I'm not sure that anybody else has taken the same approach, and I'll share that in detail next episode.
Okay. All right. So what else do we want to dive into here? Talk about before we get into the to the BioFarm segment. Oh, there's one question. I saw one of your social media posts the other day. It looks like you got a new spotting scope from Vortex. How's that thing?
Oh, that thing is fantastic. I'm telling you what, I had an old spotting scope that I got years and years ago from Vortex. Well, it was great. Don't get me wrong. There was nothing wrong with it, but it was big. I mean, it was physically twice the size of the scope I've got now. And the one I've got now is compact. The whole thing's probably 12 inches long, maybe 14 at the most. And the clarity of that thing is just phenomenal. I mean, the first time I used it, I just couldn't get over it. I'm telling you, I can count the tines on a velvet buck from 3/4 to a mile away.
Wow.
And there's been a couple times I've been using it almost every evening. There's been a couple times that you couldn't even see deer with the naked eye. They were so far away, and I zoomed in and I seen them.
Now, do you have the mount that goes onto your window for the truck, and then obviously you probably got some type of little tripod or something when you're up on top,
right.
Up on top of something, or in the fence row glassing, right?
I do. I got the clamp that fits on my truck window, and that works ideal. But you have to shut the truck off because just the slightest vibration with that magnification just blurs your view. But then I got a small tripod. Like last night, I climbed up on top of a grain bin on a farm, and just set up there on the top of that grain bin and had the tripod set up there, and I could glass pretty much the entire section where I was at. And I was seeing deer.
That's going to come in handy in right before early season in October, knowing where these deer are bedded at.
Exactly. I'm going to be able to sit a mile away and watch what these deer are doing. And I just can't get over the clarity of that thing for such a small little unit. I mean, that thing is the ticket.
Well, I mean, all of the new HD glass, our new binoculars that we got this year, even our buddy Frank Archie at Lone Wolf saw them at your master class. And he's like, I've never seen anything like this. And we got him hooked up, and we ordered him a pair. They're gonna be in here soon, so he's all excited about that. But I also got the scope ordered for my custom muzzleloader that's on order. He was supposed to be fitting the action on that this week, so I'm probably about 2 to 3 weeks away from being able to see my long-range muzzleloader for the first time. So that's going to end up with a nice piece of Vortex glass on the top of it. So I'll be posting some pictures of that here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to that.
A good deal.
All righty. Well, let's move into the BioFarm.com property of the week.
BuyAFarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
All right, this week's featured property is 230 acres in Union County, Illinois, and it's actually up on an online auction. The bidding closes Friday, July 31st. So got about a month here to take a look at this property. 230 acres again. There's an outbuilding of 40 by 80. It's got living quarters, 5 bedrooms, 2 baths. A really nice building. If you go onto the Buy a Farm website, look for the 230 acre online auction, Union County, and you can see video and lots of photos of this property. But the property is right next to Shawnee National Forest, very secluded, very little hunting pressure from adjacent landowners, excellent deer and turkey hunting. There's over 20 acres of established food plots on this property that include corn and clover and alfalfa. There's two separate easements to access the property. Just a beautiful rock bottom creek with some good giant rock formations along that creek that you'll see on the website. There's a timber stand improvement project was completed on the property in 2013, and they're saying there will be a timber harvest ready in 2023, so 3 more years, not that far away for a timber harvest. There's a large pond or small lake. It looked to me like about a 4 acre or so lake that's stocked with bass and catfish, bluegill, red ear. It was stocked 5 years ago, so those fish ought to have some size on them. Established trails throughout the property. Some of the local attractions, there's a Shawnee Bluff Canopy Tour, which is a zip line. It's less than a mile away from this property. It's only 5 minutes to the Southern Illinois Wine Trail. I forget how many wineries are on this wine trail, but there's a bunch of them that people come from all over to experience every year, and you're only 5 minutes from that. 25 minutes from Southern Illinois Airport, and 30 minutes from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. If you want to see the property, there's an inspection there Saturday, July 18th from 10 to 1. The address would be, you'll find out on the website. But if you're interested in the property, I'm sure if you can't make that show date, Don Bailey, the agent, would be glad to meet you at another convenient time and show you the property. Don's number is 618-919-1031. And, this would be a great property for like a business retreat. If some business was looking for a place for its employees or executives to get away, they could buy this property. You already got a nice building for meeting, or it'd be a good, family retreat. A family could buy it, and different members of the family go down there for vacations and weekend getaways and such. But check it out on the Buy a Farm website. Very unique property.
Yeah, this is a little bit different than some of the ones we focus on, but great for, like you said, even if a family wanted to use it as a getaway, that'd be an awesome idea.
Right. I mean, you got the hunting, you got the fishing with the 4 acre lake or pond there, but you got all those attractions, within 30 minutes of the property as well. So just lots of potential there for various activities.
All right, very cool. So go to buyafarm.com to check this property and other properties out. We know that there's, for you deer hunters that we might be interested in, the Shawnee National Forest, that area just produces a lot of big deer every year. If you're around the Midwest, you hear about that a lot. So check that out and visit Buy a Farm. We really appreciate the support of buyafarm.com and appreciate what they do for us. So before we move on, though, I hate going back to this whole love swing thing hanging in a tree. But you just said zip line. How cool was it to be able to access your tree stands to a series of zip lines and never even get down on the ground?
Well, I never thought about it, but
we could start at the top of the corn crib, go down the hill, then up the creek. You could go back on the edge of your timber. You never even have to go on the ground.
Yeah, but I don't know how the deer would take somebody flying over them. I love
spinning around slowly as you're going in the air.
I would rather see a tunnel system.
Yeah.
Where you go underground and just pop up into your stand.
Me and Patrick have talked about that, but my luck is I'd be somewhere in a pipe with an animal and it wouldn't turn out good, probably on my end. So
it's all a dream anyway.
Yeah, there you go. So we got some listener submitted questions for tonight.
Yeah, before we get started on this, Terry, I want to make a comment about these submitted questions because I've got a long list of submitted questions now, and one question I've seen several times. I bet between 5 and 10 people have asked this same question, and it's, how do I go about getting hunting permission on properties? And I don't want this to come off wrong, but there are certain questions that I'm just flat out not going to answer because I know that there's people listening to this podcast and that follows my social media. They do so silently. They never say a word. They never comment on anything. And I'm talking local people that are doing nothing but trying to basically horn in on the work that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tip off people that I'm competing with for hunting property, how I go about getting permission. I've got permission for properties that people just couldn't believe I got permission for. And even at times people thought I was trespassing and sneaking in because they just didn't believe anybody could get permission there. But so for all you folks that have submitted questions on how I go about getting access or permission to hunt properties, I'm sorry, but those questions are just not going to be answered. Essentially because of a couple of bad apples that are local. And again, I apologize, but I'm just not going to put everything out there when it's going to be detrimental to me to do so.
It is something that we talk about in your master class. You openly provide some insight on that as part of the I don't know if it came up in the Q&A but I remember talking about that quite a bit in one of your classes. So, the techniques that both of us have used, I hunt a lot of Illinois property that I don't even pay money for, that has just been developed into a relationship. And, it's a skill set of patience, and you're told no more than you're told yes. How about that? So if you think you're going to have 100% success rate and go and do it, even if your name's Don Higgins, it ain't happening. You get told no a whole lot more than you get told yes. But the whole thing if you ask 100 people and you get permission to hunt one property that's got a giant on it, it was worth it.
And I probably get turned down more than a lot of people because I just kind of got that stigma with my reputation that other deer hunters don't like me to be anywhere near where they're hunting.
If you're hunting there's got to be potential, period. So they're not going to give that up, right?
And they think that if I'm there and there's a big buck there, I'm going to kill him every time.
Right.
And that's absolutely not the case. That's not going to happen. In fact, there's more bucks that get away from me that I wish I could kill than what I do kill. But, you brought up the master class there, Terry, and one stipulation that I've got, it's right there on my website, and it's also on my brochure, that I don't allow anybody to come to that class if they live within 100 miles of my house. And it's just for that reason that there's just, and most of the local hunters are fantastic. I don't want to throw them all under the bus because that is absolutely not the case at all. But there's just a couple that just look to take advantage of anything that I'm doing. And because of those couple of bad apples, I just have to, avoid a couple of topics and also have that 100-mile limit stipulation on my master class.
Yep.
So
there's going to be some secret sauce that is not disclosed on this podcast.
Yeah, and I'm throwing that out there because I've got that question so many times, and I know there's, 8 or 10 guys out there that have submitted that question. They're probably listening every week, hoping that I answer their question this week. And if it's got to do with getting hunting permission or gaining access to a property, that's one that I'm going to avoid because I just don't want put out false information, and there's some things I don't want to share either. So that just happens to be one of them.
Yeah, good point. So if that's the question you asked, that's the reason we haven't used it. So
right.
All right, what do we got for tonight?
The first question comes from Dylan Shaw. Dylan is from Candor, New York. Dylan says, "Hope all is well, guys. My question is, I always hear about human intrusion from you guys. What do you guys consider human intrusion? Is it 5 to 10 acres with no humans, or would you go as far as 20 plus acres of no humans? Also, would you consider kids yelling half a mile away, but the buck can still hear them, human intrusion? Hope to hear from you soon, and thanks for the awesome podcast and YouTube." Human intrusion. Years ago, there was a situation close to my home where there was a state park that was just absolutely loaded with deer. And you could drive through that park just about any time of day and see, dozens of deer. And, when I started managing my own farm 30 years or so ago, I wanted to replicate what was going on that state park. And those deer were safe there because the human pressure was limited to certain areas of the park. And those deer, they were just never in danger. And they learned that they was never in danger in that park. And so I tried to replicate that on my farm by just totally eliminating human intrusion. I think everybody listening to this podcast probably knows of a property in their area that they wish they could hunt because nobody's allowed to hunt there and it's just loaded with deer. The reason it's loaded with deer is because nobody's in there. More properties are ruined by human intrusion than anything. And most of the time, the hunters are the ones putting that intrusion on there. So how big of an area are we talking about? Dylan asked, is 5 to 10 acres with no humans enough, or would you go as far as 20 plus acres? I'm saying the bigger, the better. And Terry will tell you, and the students that come to the master class see it, all of my tree stands are within 10 yards of the edge of the cover. The whole heart of the cover, I don't even go into during hunting season. Actually, from the time it greens up in the spring, all through the summer and through hunting season, I am not on that property. I'm just going across the open field to the edge and then right back out and give the deer the heart. So the more acreage you've got that's totally free of human intrusion, the better. Now, the other part of the question was, if those deer hear kids yelling a half a mile away, is that human intrusion to them? No, I don't think so. The human intrusion is actually, it's not sound, it's actually scent, and actually humans being within the cover where the deer want to bed. You got to keep that down. So the bigger the better. Absolutely zero human intrusion. The more you can replicate that, the better.
This might be something that you probably take a little bit further to the extreme than me, but maybe you can comment on it after I say what my ideas are on it. I don't go into cover. The deer I shot last year, that was when I recovered him. That was the first time in 7 years I'd been in that woodlot. I'd not been in there. So there's parts of my farm that I do not go in, period. That's why I get so upset when a coon hunter comes across the property and runs some dogs through there or something like that. But my farm is a working farm. We bale hay on it, have alfalfa on it, and I have a little bit different situation in Kentucky, and I can run feeders. So I am on the farm in the open field. I don't go back in the woods, and I think the last time I went into the woods was when we pulled those big red oak logs. I believe that was like in February. But I try to do the same thing with the same equipment at the same time of the day. And my opinion of it is a deer will pattern you before you pattern a deer. I think is if you're talking about getting access to a working farm, that's okay, but there still has to be sanctuary areas where those deer are bedding, that if you go in there and bump them out or leave scent where those deer are going to come, and then they're not used to it, they're going to probably move on or become nocturnal. But I think it is possible on a working farm, if it's handled properly, to keep some more mature deer on it. You just can't be tromping around, and you got to be very careful. I don't think you can. Once a deer gets 5 years old or older, he's a different animal, and you just risk never seeing that deer again if you bump him. And most likely he's bedding, especially in summer and early season, he's bedding extremely close to your food source. So if you're putting cameras out, if you're putting, we both run our cameras out away from everything because we know we're going to get nighttime pictures, but the reason they're out away from everything is so we can actually check them and not put pressure on that bedding area. So, I think people get confused when they say intrusion. I have 100 acres. I'm not allowed on my 100-acre farm. I think that's going a little bit extreme, especially for people who have to get income off their farm. But I'm on my farm, every 3 weeks filling feeders, and I pull the cards at the same time, but I do it the same way every single time. And, if there's a new buck there, he might get, but I think the deer are more used to how I do it than me scaring them. It's like when we checked a camera that you had, the last thing you want to do is walk up and scare a big buck, right? I've seen you blare the radio and pull the truck up and not turn the truck off. If there's a big buck there, you want him knowing you're there, so he either stays bedded down and you just walk right by him. You might walk 50 yards from a bedded buck and never know it, but you step on him and him run off, you might not see him again. So I'm probably not as conservative as you are on the pressure thing, because I still work on my farm, but you still mow your clover and you bale hay on your farm. You're just not going in the cover.
Yeah, that human intrusion really applies to the cover, and especially the bedding cover, but really all the cover. Just leave that for the deer. But, also your food plots.
You definitely don't want to go at dusk and go looking out around your food plot if deer are going to be out there. Do it at a time where you're not spooking animals.
Well, yeah, pulling up there in the middle of the day on a tractor and spraying the plot is not putting really pressure on it, because the deer, a buck has a chance to hear you coming, and he can decide, am I going to lay tight or am I going to slip away? And either thing he does, you don't detect him. When you go slipping up to a food plot at dusk to see if anything's feeding out there and you bust a deer, that's pressure. And one other thing I'm going to add about human intrusion on a property, when you start managing a property, a new one, or maybe it's a property you've had for a while, but you want to take things to the next level, that really, really limiting that human intrusion those first few years is really critical. It's more important then than ever.
Right.
You got to train them deer. And, I've said this before, when I started on my property years ago, if I would jump a deer on the property, he would bust out across open country and leave my place and hit the next woods a mile away or whatever. Today, that's not the case. I jump a deer on one side of the property, he just runs over to the other. He don't leave. They just go from one side to the other to get away from any human activity. But it took years and years of training those deer that, hey, this is the safest place in their whole home range. They can't run across the field to somebody else's property and find safety, because there's no place more safe than mine. And when you do that through generations of deer, the does teach their fawns, this is where we go for safety. This is where we bed. And then those fawns, it becomes ingrained in their heads, and then they train their fawns and on and on. And as years go by, it's just like you've got your own state park where the deer just don't want to leave, and they just
But it's consistency. It's the same thing. It's not something new. Right? I think that's the biggest thing about it. You hear these stories of these guys that'll in feeder states that will go fill up a feeder, and they'll be driving away and look back, and the deer heard them pour feed in the feeder, and they're coming out to it because they know what the result of someone being there is. That doesn't happen in 2 months of running a feeder. That's years
Right.
and years and years of doing the same thing over and over again. So I think you can still enjoy a property. I wouldn't go as far as, four-wheeler quad trails all through the woods and cutting firewood in the summer and but I think that the misconception is I have to take 100 acres and I can never step foot on it except during hunting season. I don't go that far, and I think some listeners maybe misunderstand that a little bit. But you got to have bedding area and food and stay away from it when the deer are there. That's just a commitment of discipline that you have to have.
We talked about human intrusion a lot, and anybody that listens to this podcast on a regular basis is going to hear human intrusion, probably just about every episode.
And there's people that there's people that want to argue with us and tell us, well, I ride four-wheelers all around my property and I shot a 170-inch deer. Well, congratulations. I'm very happy for you. But 9 times out of 10 to do that consistently every year, it's tough. You might get one in the rut, or you might get one up cruising that comes through, but to target a specific animal and consistently harvest, bucks 4 or 5 years or older, it's show me somebody that's riding quads and coon hunting and doing all that stuff through all their bedding area, consistently shooting deer, mature bucks, and I want to learn from that guy. So.
Well, there's a big difference between shooting big deer and shooting big deer consistently.
Exactly.
And anyway, we beat that horse to death, so let's move on to the next question. Next one comes from Morgan Murray, and Morgan is from Urbana, Illinois, right up there with Frank Archie.
Hey.
Well, I think Frank's in Champaign, but Champaign, Urbana. Morgan says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Every year, everyone always talks about the annual whitetail shift, where bucks move several miles away from their summer range and take up residence at a completely different property before the fall months. Do you believe this shift occurs consistently every year for every buck? Have you ever been able to hold a particular buck on your property year-round, or is this annual whitetail shift something that cannot be avoided? If so, what is your best suggestion for keeping those summer bucks on your land through the fall? We have a great-looking buck that is using our property now, and we would like to keep him there until hunting season if at all possible. Thanks, and keep up the great work with the podcast. I look forward to listening to you guys every couple of weeks." Okay, I'm going to back up here. That was a kind of a long one.
Well, but you have a great story to talk about this. I know where you're going. So,
yeah. So, do you believe the shift? I'm going to answer these questions in the order that Morgan typed them out here. It says, "Do you believe the shift occurs consistently every year for every buck?" I do. I don't believe every buck shifts his home range. In fact, I know they don't. My experience here in the farm country of the Midwest is that about half of the bucks that I get photos of in the summer will shift to a different fall-winter range, and half pretty much summer really close or right in the same area where they spend their fall and winter. How the bucks that do shift their range, I believe those bucks will shift their range. Those individual bucks will shift the same time every year within a couple of days. Most of this starts to happen about the time they shed velvet, when the bachelor groups are breaking up, from early September when that velvet shed starts until early October. The majority of this happens. Some younger bucks will still be shifting and seeking a new home range, those yearling bucks, into October and even November. But it's going to happen. Once they settle on a home range, it's going to happen the same time each year. Next question here. Have you ever been able to hold a particular buck on your property year-round, or is this annual whitetail shift something that cannot be avoided? Smokey is a perfect example. Buck that stayed on my property year-round. He was here in the summer, he was here in the fall, he was here in the winter. That's probably what Terry was alluding to, that he knew where I was going to go with this. Said, if so, what is your best suggestion for keeping those summer bucks on your land through the fall? We have a great You still there, Terry? Did I lose you?
No, you're fine.
Okay. If so, what is your best suggestion for keeping those summer bucks on your land through the fall? We have a great looking buck using our property now. We'd like to keep him there until the hunting season, if at all possible. You know, ironically, I just seen a YouTube video recently that someone else put out about holding those summer bucks. I don't believe you can do it. I believe when a buck is already a mature buck, that is, when a mature buck has already established a separate fall-winter range from where he summers, I think it's about impossible to hold him there, after the summer. Trump was a buck that I shot a couple years ago that had a very distinct summer range and a totally different fall-winter range. And I don't think there was anything that could be done to hold that buck or any other buck on his summer range into the fall. Just my opinion. There probably is a rare buck out there that may make a liar out of me, but it's going to be very, very rare. Don't take it to the bank or you're going to lose money most of the time. Anything you want to throw in here, Terry?
I'm just going to ask a clarifying question so people understand it. So what you're saying is not every deer is going to be the same. There's going to be some that stay put and some that roam on this shift. Once a deer figures out what he's going to do, you're not going to change that. Well, you might change it by bumping him off, but you're not going to keep him from shifting by putting in a water hole or planting soybeans. That deer's going to shift. But
right.
But I think that there's some other strategies that we maybe could talk about in another podcast and lead to it, because we won't have time to get into this. But you've talked about how at the beginning or just before the rut and at the end of the rut, those bucks that summered on your plays will return to their summer domain to look for a hot doe. So patterning that deer and being there from last year's trail camera information, he's going to come back. What was the article you wrote that was about that?
It was homecoming buck.
Homecoming buck. So there's a strategy there. And then there's also a likelihood that if you provide the late season food, that they'll return for that, because most of the time all of the row crops are done at that time and they're coming back looking for food when it gets really, really late in the year. So I think from a standpoint of can you keep a deer from roaming, probably not, but there is some techniques if you guys have a specific bucks that's summering on you that doesn't stay, that you could still have a shot at that buck if you can't figure out where he's going and get access.
And that's a great point, Terry. And just briefly, the story or the article that I wrote, Homecoming Bucks, I detailed numerous mature wild deer that I've watched over the years had a trait of very early in the rut, typically around November 6th, 7th, 8th, right before the does really start coming in heat. A lot of times those bucks that have relocated to a fall-winter range will run back to their summer range, and usually it's like a one-day or an overnight venture back, and I'm sure what they're doing is they couldn't find a hot doe on their fall-winter range, so they run back to their summer range real quick to see if there happens to be a hot doe there. They don't find one, and they head right back to their fall-winter range, and the same thing happens at the very tail end of the rut around Thanksgiving. They'll make that journey back, and that's why I titled the article Homecoming Bucks. But you got a very, very brief window to catch those bucks doing that.
Yeah. So. And we have I haven't asked your permission to say this, but I hope it's okay. You'll scream at me if I don't, but you have a buck that is we've seen multiple years on one of the hunting properties that you have, that you've just figured out where his summer range is. He actually shows up at the farm that you can hunt during hunting season. And it wasn't, I think, until last year you figured out where he was summering at. But I don't think that buck was showing up on that piece of property until in October. And,
Right.
So, that'll be a story that hopefully we can track a little bit more later on this year and document a little bit. Because he
I know exactly.
He might end up being a target buck for you once you see him.
Yeah, I know exactly the buck you're talking about. He's 7.5 years old this year. Shows up in early to mid October, around the second or week or so of October. I'd have to go back and look at pictures to get the exact date where he's usually within a couple of days. I get his picture for the first time, but I never could find that buck in the summer. And last summer, I finally figured out where he went. And, he's moving at least 2 miles from where his fall winter range. He summers, 2 miles away, or maybe a little farther. And there's a lot of bucks that do that.
We found his sheds not last year, but the year before. We found his weak side 2 years ago. We didn't find his sheds last year, did we?
No.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, he's 7.5 years old this year, and we've only got one antler off of him.
Yeah.
He leaves before he sheds.
Right.
He's on the property we can hunt. He shows up in October, but then he leaves before he sheds antlers. Except for that one, that's all we've got.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing. One of these days, I'm going to have you not. It doesn't matter what property we lay it at, but have a center hub and almost have these wheel spokes that go out from it. And it's really an interesting conversation. You've talked about it in your master class sometimes. If you imagine your property being the center of a spoked wheel, and these deer are leaving your property and going somewhere else, or they're coming to your property from somewhere else, you want to create the habitat, the hub of that wheel, which is your property, to be the intersection point of all of those other bucks that are either summering and leaving and coming back, or summering and coming to you during the rut or during the late season. You want your property to be the hub of that wheel where you got all these spokes, which is those deer shifting back and forth to where they're on your property more of the time. And I think maybe we need to just sit down and make a graphic on that and maybe post it on social media. I think it'll make a whole lot more sense when people start talking about what can they do to their property to make it stand out that these deer are on your property more. So pretty neat conversation.
Yeah, and to build on that just a little bit, if you imagine a property as the hub, as Terry explained, and then the bucks that are on that property in that hub, there will be certain bucks that will only leave one direction. And my home property, I've got trail cameras out in every direction for, I don't know, at least 2 to 3 miles in every direction from my farm. And so a lot of the bucks that I see on my farm, I will get their picture also 2 or 3 miles away. But, one buck, he will leave to the east, and that's the only direction he goes. It's like I'm the farthest property to the west that he goes. Another buck will only go to the south, and then he comes back. I don't get in other words, I don't get a buck's picture from my property. I don't get his picture to the east of my property, to the south of my property, to the west. It's like they all leave in different directions,
right?
But they come back to that center hub property. And I think a lot of that has to do with the quality of the property. I've made my property secure with the secure bedding cover, and there's food here year round. So they got food and safety, unlike any property in my whole area. So it draws them in from each direction. But
it just goes back to that conversation we talked about yearly patterns of deer.
Right.
But we don't, what you're saying is you don't believe it's just a uneducated guess. Well, I'm going this way tomorrow, and then today I'm going over here.
Nope.
It's much more strategic about where that deer is going to go and when. So hope that answered your question a little bit there, Morgan. Did we get all the questions in there? I know you read a bunch.
Yeah, I think that was all of them.
Okay. We appreciate the question.
Morgan.
You're going to get a free
Absolutely.
T-shirt.
Yep. So our last question comes from Zach Anderson of Bay City, Wisconsin. Zach says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Do you think if a mature buck had its choice of the habitat it would live in, what would it be?" So a landowner with basically a blank canvas of property they could mold it for the best possible living quarters for them. Thanks and God bless. I have no doubt in my mind that my favorite deer cover, because the deer love it so much, not because I love it so much, but my favorite deer habitat is a growed up cattle pasture. It's full of briars, saplings, a scattered big oak tree here and there. They usually got a creek going through them. A lot of cattle pastures are rougher ground. They'll have a pond or a creek for water, but that grassy type cover with a lot of a high stem count, wooded vegetation, but there's still some grass there, and briars and weeds. When you've got that, I mean, that is absolutely the most ideal deer cover there is. I like my native grasses, switchgrass, for example, is great bedding cover. I like timbers that have been, manipulated, not so much through hinge cutting. I'm not a huge fan of that, but hinge cutting or just dropping trees to create, to allow sunlight to come in and create some structure on the ground. But if I had my choice, it would be a cow pasture, an old growed up cow pasture that hadn't had cattle in it for about 8 or 10 years or so. That's just the best deer cover there could ever possibly be. And one note I'm going to throw out here for you guys looking to purchase a hunting property. Most deer hunters do not know what good deer cover looks like, and they do not know how a good deer hunting property lays out. If I was looking to buy a piece of property, I would look for a cattle pasture, because you can, even if there's cattle in it, it doesn't take long to get them cattle out. It doesn't take long for it to turn into something fantastic. And pasture ground does not bring that much money because farmers are not really interested in it through most of the Midwest. Now, you get in some more western states west of the Mississippi, that becomes a little bit different. But east of the Mississippi, there's not that many cattle farmers or big cattle farmers. That pasture ground does not have the value as flat row crop ground. Also, the cattle pasture ground does not have the interest from the deer hunters as from a recreation standpoint. It doesn't bring as much typically as recreation ground. That cattle pasture is usually a bargain as far as price. But man, I'm telling you, that is the best cover for deer that there is.
My grandfather told me a long time ago that a white-tailed deer is probably the best at adapting to its surroundings of any animal on the planet. That they can live in a fence row, they can live in a subdivision, they can live in a national forest, they can live in the woods, they can live out on the plains. The bottom line is I think you got to keep people out if you want deer there.
That's true.
But yeah, I agree with you. We've both seen, we found a piece of property that had an old cattle pasture on it. Was it last year or 2 years ago? And we were both thinking the same thing on it. My farm here in Kentucky is an old dairy farm that the area of the that I said I hadn't been in 7 years, that was a wooded pasture. So you can imagine that how grown up that was with cedars, and I mean, it's nasty. I mean, half of it you have to crawl through. So yeah, most of the farm that I hunt here in Kentucky is a grown up cattle pasture. So that's my favorite.
Yep. Well, we've answered all the questions for this week, Terry.
3 good questions that all get a free T-shirt. So we've gotten a couple people. I've had 3 people reach out to me in the last week on social media asking how to submit a question. And you go to Higgins Outdoors or Chasing Giants. I guess you can indirectly get there by typing in Chasing Giants and submit your questions on Higgins Outdoors page. But make sure we've gotten a couple really good questions and people didn't fill in all the information, so we can't use it because we don't have a way to send them their T-shirt. So if we don't have an email address back and an address, Obviously, we're not posting that, but we need that to send you out your free T-shirt. So go to Higgins Outdoors website.
Terry, I'm about to lose you. In fact, I did lose you.
No, I'm
I'm
here.
not sure if you can hear me or not.
I can hear you. Are you still there? I can hear you.
Okay, there you are. I
Yeah.
lost you for just a bit.
No, you're fine. I was just telling everybody to go to HigginsOutdoors.com and submit your questions, and that's how you get your free T-shirt. Make sure you fill out all of the information in those fields to get it. So, any other news you wanted to talk about before we sign off here tonight?
We just want to remind everybody, next episode, we're going to talk about getting into the hunting industry, my experience and yours, Terry. 2 different angles. Got questions related to that topic, be sure to submit them in the next week or so, and we'll try to focus the entire episode on getting into the hunting industry.
Sounds great. So make sure you're checking out HigginsOutdoors.com, the social media, Don Higgins, Higgins Outdoors on Instagram and Facebook, and then also the new YouTube channel on YouTube, Higgins Outdoors. Go watch that video. Make sure you like and subscribe to that. Share them with your friends. We appreciate it as Don takes us out for thanking our sponsors. We want to also remind you, please give us some feedback or a review on Apple Podcast. It really helps people who want to listen to stuff about deer hunting find us and make recommendations. It'll help our channel grow and get to more people. We appreciate it. Take us out, Don.
Thanks, everybody. Look forward to talking to you next episode. Want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, 360 Hunting Blind, Quiet Cat, Lone Wolf, Matthews, Vortex, and Real World Wildlife Products.
We are not sponsored by a tree saddle company.
And probably won't be.
Take care, everybody.